Let's do
Okay.
Okta. We're here. Steve, what does Okta do?
Okta I know about from the consumer side. I know nothing about the economics of this business. I know nothing about its competitive position. But here is the kind of lowdown on what Okta does from the perspective of somebody who uses it. Basically, I have a thing where it appears at the top of my internet browser and there's like an Okta button. And if I click on that, I can log into all of my kind of, workplace apps of a sort. So there's Slack and there's Google Documents and there's Outlook and there's loads of other things. They're all managed on one login, which is my kind of Okta login, and that seems to be effectively what kind of goes on there. I've no idea whether any other company could do that. I've no idea. I assume there's a significant switching cost, but I don't know anything about that from the kind of economics side. It doesn't seem particularly expensive to run, so I imagine the margins are massive if it makes any money, but then again, it's a fairly young tech company, so I suppose it probably doesn't. That's pretty much all I can do without actually looking at something to do with the company rather than my limited user interaction with it.
Okay.
That's interesting that you see it in that way, because I see it as more of a branding app than anything else. But that's interesting. I didn't know people were using it that way. Sorry, Steve. You're the man on this.
Identity management app. Essentially, it's a security sort of cyber security app. So I'll just give you a really quick rundown then. So it's released its earnings. This was up to July 31st, I think it was the close. So total revenue was up 43%. Subscription revenue was up 44%. So this is 452 million, of which 435 of it is recurring, essentially. So that's about 96%. Free cash flow margin was probably the next interesting one on there. That was actually negative 5.3%. Total customers was up 26%. So Okta is doing okay, I guess is what I would say about that. It's not a profitable company. It's probably going to do about sort of 1.6 to 1.8 billion in its full year. So, I mean, that shouldn't be too bad. Against consensus, I'll just quickly give you that, Paul, before I know you've got an idea of why it's down a bit. But it beat consensus on revenues, operating income, op margin, adjusted EPS, billings. It also beat on guidance for the next quarter, operating income, adjusted EPS. It matched on revenues, and it actually guided full year and beat on all four: revenues, operating income, operating margin, adjusted EPS. So this stock's down 40% today. Paul, why do you think it is?
Well, I don't know a lot about this company, but cybersecurity in general was very, very hot last year, wasn't it? And so anything that's not going as perfect as it should do is tending to lead to a big slide in any stock, really, at the moment, and particularly in cybersecurity, because a lot of cybersecurity. What's the big one in cybersecurity? Forgot what it's called.
There's all sorts, isn't it?
CrowdStrike
is
Palo
one.
Alto.
Palo Alto,
CrowdStrike was the one I was trying to think of. That's taken a bit of a hit recently as well, hasn't it? So there's a bit of falling with the sector in itself, but it bought a company last year called Auth.io or Auth0 or something like that. I had no idea what the company does, but it was a big acquisition for them apparently, and it's not working. And when the company says it's not working, they're not integrating it very well, or they're having struggles integrating it. That has led investors to believe that this is the start of, we're going to give up on this and maybe even sell it, or have to write it down because it's not worth what we paid for it. So that has knocked off like 25% today, I think it is, but 40% in general. I might be wrong about that as well. Yeah, when something isn't going as well as it should do, stocks in this market are getting hit hard. Do you know anything more about this, Steve?
Yeah, the only thing I would really tack on is that Thoma Bravo is building the biggest cybersecurity company around at the moment, and that's the big problem for Okta. Okta really needed to show a lot of resilience here, maybe even sort of some improvements on its bottom line, its free cash flow margins. It didn't do that. I say it only grew up 40%, but this isn't a particularly big company, so 40% isn't we're not talking about the law of big numbers here. So Thoma Bravo recently has acquired its biggest competitor, which is called Ping Identity. There's talks of that they're trying to acquire Darktrace. We went through quite a few. There's Anaplan they've bought recently. SailPoint, which is another large sort of endpoint security company. So they're building this big conglomerate, and then you've got Palo Alto. That's earnings actually weren't too bad. Palo Alto did pretty well. CrowdStrike was pretty good as well, and you got to look at Okta in the middle of this, saying like, well, you're having trouble integrating this one company. You're really only firing in one particular department, and you've got these two big companies just pushing down either side of you. I think that's Okta's problem. I just think it might not be the one that wins in that sector.
Yeah, very interesting. Okta there, one of the smaller stocks. I really hadn't really heard about it until a few weeks before we had Thingy from the Motley Fool on the podcast, who famously owns it. So, when I say Thingy, what's his name?
Yeah, Chris Hill.
God, I'm terrible with names, aren't I? I'm so horrible with names. I remember everything about people, but not their names. I'm terrible at it. Yeah, Chris Hill, friend of the show, owns Okta, and he's probably hurting a little bit as well because it suffered a bit last year at the same time.